Welcome to Wire Guild. This tutorial is for a watch strap. It's quite a firm watch strap, and it's really rather pretty, and it goes on a largish watch. Now you're going to need a watch face to go in the middle, and then you're going to need some 21 gauge square wire. How much you need will depend on how big you're going to make the watch strap. You're going to need some 18 gauge half hard, half round. I used 8 4mm beads, and you're going to need approximately 4.5 inches of 1mm or 18 gauge round wire. The watch that you're going to use in the middle could be anything. It could be one that you've got an old strap that's broken on it or fallen off. The one I've used is a custom bought one that I just bought to put the strap on. Now you can see on this that it's like a bangle strap. It's quite firm. It's strong. It doesn't have much in the way of give, and you've just got enough design on it to make it really attractive. So I have another watch here. If anybody is interested in these watches, I do have them in the shop, and it's got a nice broad open band there that I can add my wire to make the strap. So you need to work out how big you want your watch to be. Pop your watch in the middle to work out how big it is, because you're going to allow for that. I want my watch strap to be 6.5 inches. Now that's actually quite small, but this one's for a particular person, and they need it to measure 6.5 inches. So the watch itself in the middle is just over an inch. It's sort of that size there, so you can see it's just a little bit more. So if I want 6.5 inches, I'm going just over 3 to the in the middle, and then you've got your watch. I like to give myself a little bit extra. Even when I'm working with silver, I would rather have a little bit extra wire and not ruin the whole thing. So I'm going to give myself about 3.25-ish inch. I don't know what this is in centimeters. Sorry, folks, I'm really useless at centimeters. So I am going to cut myself a load of lengths of 3.25 inches. I'm going to cut 16 of them because I want 8 on each side. So I'm just going to cut off 16 of these. So I'll just whiz this forward because really, you don't want to get bored watching me cut these lengths of wire. If you have a smaller watch which has much less room at either side, you could probably get away with using less than 8 wires. I would never suggest using much less than 5 because it's not really going to be strong enough. There we go. Have I got enough yet? No, not yet. So you can play with this idea to fit whatever watch you happen to have. The one I have is quite big. It needs quite a bit of wire. I could probably use more than 8 wires, but I'm going to show you how I can make these spread all the way across that width and sort of fill it. So I've got my 8 wires together. I don't need the other set at the moment, so I'll put them on one side. And I'm just going to wriggle that in my fingers until I get these flat and square. If you find it easier to use a piece of masking tape or something like that, decorator's tape, do that. Personally, pair of pliers in my fingers and I'm quite happy. Now, I'm trying to get these all straight, all flat and laid next to each other. And I'm going to take about, quarter of an inch-ish, about a centimetre. Yeah, about a centimetre. And I'm going to go straight across all 8 wires with some flat nose pliers, grip, and then I'm going to nice and neatly bend the lot. So I've got a nice right angled bend. You'll see the reason why I do all these together in a minute. So I'll pop those down, get my watch, and I'm going to take the first wire and I'm going to pop that over the, I don't actually know what you call this bar at the side of the watch. I know some of them come off. On this one it's fixed, and I'm going to start and wrap that spare end of wire around. Now you can see why I put the bend in. It's so that they all go on in the same place. So you can see I've wrapped all the way around Push a little further. Push a bit more. I'm being very careful. This is square wire and I want it to lay as flat as it possibly can. You can do this with round wire. I know in the UK particularly it is difficult to get hold of square wire, and if you can't get hold of it but you really would like to make a watch strap, have a go with round. It's not as easy when it comes to binding it all together with round wire as is square, because square does tend to lay flat. So I've wrapped that all the way around till my wire's disappeared. So I've actually wrapped around sort of like 2 full times or 2.5 times, just making sure the end's flat. What that's going to do is give me a little tiny, like a spacer, if you like, a buffer, an area where the next wire can't sit up right up next to my first one. Nice and smooth, no sharpie bits. And then when I add the next one, you see I add it at the side in there and start and do the same thing again, wrap those round. You can play with this to suit your watch. If you've got a very small watch and you don't have a lot of room, you may only be able to wrap around once before you have to trim that wire off and say, okay, that's it, I've gone round, because if I wrap around multiple times, I'm not going to get all these wires side by side. I know that with I've done this before, I know that I can wrap around sort of 2 or 3 times and still have room for 8 wires all the way across. Let's just press that down. I'm doing it so that I can still move the wires. It's firm, it's tightish, but not so tight that I can't move these wires up and down. You need some movement with a watch. You need some movement so that it can be taken on, taken off, put on, put on, put off. If you make it super tight onto that little bar, you'll find what you're doing is you're actually damaging the metal each time that you put the watch on and you take it off, because you're going to be pulling against your wrapping as opposed to allowing it to slip over the bar. You see, I'm doing an awful lot of faffing about with it. I'm making sure those wires are straight. I'm making sure those wires are close and even. Now, I speeded this up because I am going to do exactly the same thing now with all the other wires, so that I get all 8 wires on. If as you're going across you think, you know what, I started off, I wrapped that first one around 3 times and I'm not going to have enough room, reduce the number. The way that we put the beads on will make it so that that is not that noticeable on the actual piece. If you need to reduce the number of times that you're wrapping around, say from 3 to 2, or even from 2 to 1, trim it off. Don't leave that bend hanging down. Put that bend on the bar and wrap around, and then if you have excess wire, then you can take a pair of snips and you can just trim it off like that. You notice I'm using my bent nose pliers quite a lot for this. I find them very good for doing watches. You can sort of get in with them that little bit easier. If you don't have a pair of bent nose, don't worry about it. Use your snipe nose, anything that's small enough to get in there. And the whole aim is keeping this neat. You want these wires to lay as flat and as close as possible. Now this is the last one that I'm just popping on there. There we go. So I've got, excuse me, 8 wires, nice and flat, coming down from the watch. Now I'm just going to fiddle with these so that they are even and straight. You don't want any crossing over or, you know, being slightly bent. Now I'm going to take 3 outer wires, either side, doesn't matter because we're going to do exactly the same on the other side. and I'm going to slide a bead onto the middle of those 3 wires. Then I'm going to take a pair of pliers and supporting the wires with my left or non-dominant hand, using the right hand with the pliers, I can squeeze that up and around the bead. So I've brought those 3 wires nice and close together. They're still flat, they're not crossed, they're not in a bunch, they're in a nice flat neat line. So I've got some 18 gauge half hard half round wire. If you've only got 21 gauge, that's fine, use that, it'll be okay. And I'm going to wrap this around just underneath the bead where I've brought those 3 wires together, nice and tight. Wrap it around. Then on the back, come on, I can just trim off. There's my pliers, there we go. And flatten down. Nice and flat. It may seem a little bit wasteful. You can see all that great big chunk of wire that I have there. But it's no good. I just can't work with a little tiny titchy bit of half round. My bindings don't work out neat if I have a little squidgy bit. So I would rather throw that in a scrap pot and then send it back to the company and they'll give me some money back than have an untidy binding. So now I'm going to take the 3 wires from the other side of the watch. And where's the middle one gone? There we go. And pop a bead on. These beads that I'm using here are sort of little iridescent hematite beads. But you could use any kind of beads. The other watch that I'll show you towards the end that I've done has got copper beads on it. That looks really lovely. I suppose it would depend on the colour of your watch. You could match up with your watch face. So I'll pop the bead on just like I did with the first one, supporting it with my left hand, and then I'm going to squeeze those wires together so that they come around the bead and meet. It can be a little fiddler, just keep going. Nice and slow. There we go, come on. That's it. Your left hand is as important as your right. Or should I say your non-dominant hand is as important as your dominant hand. Because all the support that you give your wire with the other hand is what helps to keep it neat, what helps to keep it straight. So I've got my half round wire here again, and again I am going to wrap that around. I'm only wrapping around twice. It's not really doing anything structural, it's more the design. Come here, wrap around. If you are not keen on little tiny bits of binding, like I'm doing here, you could use something like a metal bead. You know the crimp beads that are sort of long and tubular? If you could get those to go over the wire, sufficient, 3 pieces of wire, and then just flatten those down slightly, it would give you a very similar effect without having to do the binding. But I quite like binding, so we'll put a bit of binding on. Now then, get that one flattened down, rearrange my wires. So I've got 2 wires that are bare in the middle and 3 wires on either side that have a bead and a binding in. So I'm going to move the outer wire now slightly out of the way, and the same on the other side. So that's the 2 outer wires, sorry, slightly out of the way. And then I'm going to bead, come here, as if we've split, so it's on the 3rd one from the edge. And we're going to make a group of 3 now using one of the middle wires. So if you like, it's like wire number 4 is coming down straight down the middle. Wire number 5, because I'm on the right hand side, aren't I, has got the bead on. Wire number 6 is coming down to join with it. So we took 3 from the very edge when we put our first bead on, and this time we've moved 1 wire inwards and we're taking the next 3. I hope that makes sense. I've put the bead on. Again, I am bringing the wires either side of it so that it curves. I'm just going to move those out of the way. This is why as well you need a little bit of movement, because if you can't get them out of the way, it makes it really difficult. So let's bring these wires together around the bead. They're neat and around my bead yet. When they are, I can start with my half round wire. I put a bend in the end of the half round wire. I always put a bend in it. It just makes it easy to wrap around because you sort of hook it onto place. I do have a free skill set video on bindings if you want to watch that. It's just a short video and it's just to do with bindings. It might help if you can't quite see what I'm doing. There we go. So I wrap it around twice. Flatten it down with the pliers. That one's a little loose, so I'm just going to pull back, pull round, tighten it up. Make sure it's neat. And flatten down. Let's cut these end bits off at the back. You can play with these wires. You could add as many or as few beads as you want. You could do beads all the way around. It's entirely up to you. I've found that watches sell very well. It shows them that people like them. I think it's because jewellery, when it really comes down to it, it's not really that, necessary. I mean, we all love it and we want it, but we don't need it. Whereas a watch, people can actually say, well, yeah, I need a watch, I need to be able to tell the time. So I'm doing the same on the other side. So I have 1 wire sticking out with nothing happening. And then the other 3 are being used with the middle one with the bead on. And then a wire either side. Half round wire, put a bend in it. When you're putting a bend in it, make sure that you put a bend so that the flat side of your wire is on the inside of this bend. The flat side of the wire always goes against your work. The domed side is upwards. Let's just wrap that around. In you go. And trim off. So yeah, watches are pretty good. I like watches. If you wanted to take the same idea and use this as a bracelet, it would be quite easy to do so. Obviously, you're not going to have a central piece, so you just cut yourself 8 long pieces of wire instead of 16 shorter pieces. And you could bind either side. It'd look quite pretty. So I've got now 2 groups of 3 wire in the middle that have been bound and my 1 wire either side. And now I'm going to bring the whole thing together. Remember, we want flat. We want smooth. The whole beauty of this piece is that the wires are neat and crisp. So take care of your bindings. Take care that your wires are laying flat. Now I just brought those wires in. Can you see there? I'm just bringing them in gently. Going back over the top with my pliers. If your pliers are over your wire, you can't have a crossed wire because, of course, it would be raised and there isn't room for that. Now I'm going to bind all 8 wires together. There we go. And I'll probably wrap around maybe 4 or 5 times. Let's just get that neat. pressing down with the pliers. The more you press down with the pliers, the more you're encouraging a nice flat piece of work as opposed to a clump. You don't want these in a clump. You don't want a bunch of wires. We want a nice neat flat. There we go. When trimming off at the back, if you can trim off less than halfway, the folded piece of wire that you've trimmed is more likely to stay sitting flat and down than if you to trim it over halfway. Now I'm just wriggling this about because one of those beads is not quite neat and it's driving me crackers. So I'm just going to push that with the pliers until it sits in the right place. There we go. Wires are nice and close together, nothing crossing, beads are in place. So I'm going to do exactly the same now on the other side of the watch. So I'm going to add each of my 8 pieces of wire. I'm going to put the beading design in, and as you can see, I've now got 2 sides to my watch strap. Now, as I said earlier, this watch needs to be 6.5 inches long. So these wires need to be 6 because I'm going to add a clasp. I'm going to gain a bit more wire. So this side, I've centered my watch on the 3-inch mark, and I'm just going to draw a line over here where it says 6. Snips. Straight across that line and press. Little press. Then when you release, there will be a proper little groove going across your wire, and then you can just nick that off one wire at a time. So back in the center again, putting the little winder on the watch at the 3-inch mark so that I know that it's dead central. And mark the other side. Again, pliers over the top of the pencil mark and just press. That then gives me it's a little gouge line. It's a little mark in the wire. You can see it. Now they look so tiny, do those straps. They really, really do look tiny. Anyway, half round wire. Going to put a bend in it, making sure that the flat side is on the inside and the dome side is out. And then I'm going to bind the ends. Don't forget to flat down with your pliers so that nothing crosses. And again, I'll wrap around 4 or 5 times, something like that. But we have to leave a piece of wire sticking out at the end because that is how we are going to attach our clasp. Keep going. I need to leave myself approximately 1/4 inch. So let's just trim that wire off. There we go. If you get a little under 1/4 inch, it's hard to work. If you get too much over, it's untidy when you've finished. I'll press that down. So let's see what I've got. I've got about 1/4 inch. It's about 6 mil or 1/4 inch that you need sticking out at the end. And I'm going to do the same with the binding on the other side. So a nice sharp bend in my wire. And then just wrap it around, pressing down each time. It's looking quite nice. So bring these around. Make sure that you get the same amount of bindings on both sides of the watch. I mean, probably nobody will notice, but you'll notice, you know. It's one of those things really you need to get it even. How many did I put on? I think I put 5 on. Because I work from left to right, because I'm right-handed, sometimes you won't judge this end very well and you might find that you have too much or too little. just put your pliers against your binding and just give it a wriggle. You know, give it a little shove upwards or a little shove downwards so that it's in the right place. Lovely. So my end bindings are now on. Just neatening up there. I've gone slightly slanty. Just not too much. It's a tiny smidgen off because I've already measured it. And if I start eating lumps of wire off it now, I'm going to end up with a watch that's just too small, which is no good. You can remove wire and make something smaller. Unfortunately, you can't glue extra bits in and make it bigger. So let's make our clasp. So I've got some 1mm or 18 gauge round wire, and I'm measuring myself a piece that's 2 inch and a piece that's 2.5 inch. The 2.5 inch piece will be our hook and the 2 inch piece will be our eye. So if you want, if it makes it easier, 2.5 inch, measure it halfway, 1.25, put a line on it, nice straight ended pliers. When you put your pliers at the side of the line. If you put them over the top, it won't work, you won't be central. So put them at the side, bend it down and squeeze it together. Lovely. There we go, just tighten that up. So it's just one piece of wire that we've folded in two. Once you've got that folded, I'm just going to take my round nose pliers, grip over the fold and turn that so that it creates a little hook. Flat nose pliers over the top of the hook, bend the wires open, one either side. Done. Round nose pliers, grip the end and curl it in. All the way in till it touches. Same on the other side. All the way in until it touches. You may need to wriggle with yours at this point. It depends on how far you've bent the wires out to the side. You may need to bring them in slightly, or you may need to widen them slightly, but that's your hook. Now your eye is your 2 inch piece of wire, and I'm going to grip that in the middle with my round nose pliers. And I'm going to curve that around so that it makes like a U shape. Just grip there, curve so that the ends meet. Then take one side and grip at the end and shape that. Sorry, my dog's barking at things. Shape that all the way around so it touches the wire. And the same on the other side. Grip all the way around. Then if you put the pliers in either hole and just pull them together like so, that neatens it all up. So it's a little eye. Now we have to prepare the wire to do this. So I'm going to grip and I'm just going to spread these wires out. There we go. So I'm creating two groups of 4 wire. Now this side is a little bit short. I might flip the filming over to the other side and show you on this side. Right. So I'm moving 1, 2, 3, 4 wires, and that is all one side. And I'm keeping them in a group. And then the other 4 wires. 1, 2, come on, 3, 4. So it's just a V. Then I'm going to go over the top of all of them with my flat pliers and bend them upwards. Then using my round nose pliers, I can grip the end and group and curl each group of 4 into a little hook. If you don't separate the wires and put that little V in the middle, it's really difficult to put the actual hook and eye on. And we don't want that. So I'm just, don't make these wires touch, because of course you've got to get your hook and your eye on. So if you curve these over so they touch, it don't work. Now then, pliers. I'm going to go in and over, in and over. I'm smoothing these circles down so that it touches the wire of the strap. I aren't scrunching this so that it just goes sort of like squatch. I'm easing it over in a circle. We want those cut edges of the wire to be touching the strap. And then the same on the other side. So the wires have been separated, curled, and then I'm going to do, exactly the same thing. Look, can you just see a little hook there? I've just added this in so that you can see that hook. There you go. So you can see the size of hook that you're making. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to do exactly the same that I did on the other side. I'm going to add the hook onto it, and then I'm just going to ease those bits over so that they're into position. And then you've got a hook on one end and an eye on the other of your watch. So we need to shape it. This needs to now be a wrist shape. I've got honestly, I do have wrist mandrels, but I tend to use jam jars or tubes or bottles or whatever I've got lying around. That's not round enough because this is a little one. Hang on, what have I got here? Oh yeah, pencil sharpener. That'll do. So little pencil sharpener. And I'm just going to ease those. You could use the neck of a bottle, the end of your ring mandrel, anything, just to get that nice curve. Then using my fingers, I'm bringing my two fingers out and I'm easing down on the clasp. Ease down on the watch. All the time, there's those two fingers on the inside that are just bringing those wires nice and gently. And there we are. This is never going to fit me. Whoops, nearly. Oh, almost. I'm amazed. However, it will fit the person that it's been made for. It's just not me. So let me just flick that off. You can add a safety chain to the two loops on the hook and eye if you wish. There's one that I made with copper beads, and you can see much larger size, and the one that I made with the hematite beads. It's a really nice design and they do very well. So I hope you like making watch straps. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wrapping.